When I was 19, I witnessed a murder. The killer saw me and decided to silence me. Just as I was about to die, I said something. Something that made him stop. That sentence saved my life. Many years later, when the killer was finally caught, reporters swarmed toward me like sharks smelling blood. And that was when I realized. The words that once saved me were actually a prophecy. 1. When the serial killer Declan was arrested, he was unnervingly calm. He confessed to every crime he could still remember. In other words, there were plenty he couldn't. Monstrous and inhuman didn't even begin to describe what he'd done. According to him, as long as the time and place felt right and the urge to kill rose, he would do it. With just one exception. On New Year's Eve in 1998, he spared a 19-year-old girl. 18 years later, that girl was now in her late 30s. When he got to this part, Declan realized that one small act of mercy among so many atrocities wouldn't save him from execution. So he brushed it off with a few careless words. It was New Year's. I just didn't feel like killing anymore. After Declan's execution, rumors about that one act of mercy exploded. Every theory pointed toward a local art instructor named Bella. The media pounced on it instantly. After all, a psychopath like Declan wouldn't simply let someone go because it was New Year's or he suddenly changed his mind. There had to be more to the story. 2. My name is Bella. I'm an unknown painter, teaching at a small local art college. My days are spent lecturing, painting, and occasionally holding small exhibitions. I'm a loner, sensitive, anxious, and long plagued by mental struggles. I hate being in the spotlight. Until Declan's case made me infamous. Only he and I know why he truly let me go. It was New Year's Eve, 1998. His hands were around my throat, and I could barely breathe. With my last ounce of strength, I said one sentence. And he stopped. He let me go. I lived. 3. Bella, please. Tell me, what really happened that night? The most persistent reporter of them all was named Beckett. It was a horrible experience, I told him. I don't want to relive it. Beckett chased me for over a month. I turned him down again and again. He was one of those relentless tabloid journalists who wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. As if this interview had become his life's mission. Bella, if you just tell me the truth, I'll do anything you ask. I won't deny I was moved by his determination. But it wasn't that I didn't want to talk about that night. I couldn't. Because I knew. Once I opened that door, there would be no going back. 4. Until one day, my assistant called. Beckett came to your art show today. I listened quietly, then gave a faint, bitter smile. So that's how it is. So that's how it begins. 5. Knock, knock, knock. Right on cue, Beckett knocked on the studio door. The moment he stepped in, before he could even speak, I greeted him with a calm smile. I've decided to accept your interview. He froze, clearly caught off guard. I took a deep breath and said quietly. That New Year's Eve, I nearly died. Declan's hands were around my neck, and I said something, a single sentence. A prophecy. Then he let me go. At the time, I didn't think it meant anything, I continued. But 18 years later, I realized. That prophecy had finally come true. Start from the beginning, Beckett said softly. I sighed, picked up the kettle, and poured 2 glasses of water. Here. Drink. He hesitated, waited for me to sip first, and only then took a cautious drink himself. The interview officially began. Beckett started by summarizing Declan's case. Serial killer Declan committed over a dozen murders in the past decade, he said. All his victims were women. His first killing dates back to the 1980s. Every murder was random, no pattern, no clear motive. When the police caught him, they kept most of the details confidential. Only after his execution did rumors spread about a single moment of mercy. That rumor led to you, Bella. Yes. Declan once said he spared you because it was New Year's Eve, that he didn't feel like killing anymore. That's obviously not believable. Why not? I asked. We dug into his childhood, Beckett said. His father died young. He was raised by his mother. Later, both of them were kidnapped. His mother's family was poor, they couldn't pay the ransom. His mother was killed. Declan survived and ended up working alone in another province. It's the classic tragic background of a psychopath. I thought for a moment. He actually told me about that. Beckett leaned forward. He told you? So, what, did he see you as one of his own? Or did you know each other before? No. We didn't know each other, and I wasn't one of his people, I said firmly. He killed randomly. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then I added quickly, I wasn't his accomplice. I've never done anything wrong. I tried to steer the conversation back. So why tell me about his childhood? To show that he had no family, Beckett said. And maybe that made him more furious, more extreme. Which means using New Year's Eve as an excuse doesn't fit. For someone like him, that day shouldn't have meant anything. That's what makes it suspicious. I nodded slowly. I understand. Without a family, there's no such thing as a holiday. I relate to that. I'm an orphan too, abandoned at birth. I never had a family either. Beckett immediately apologized, and for a moment the air grew heavy. He glanced around, trying to change the subject. I saw your exhibition today. No need to flatter me, I said with a wry smile. I may be neurotic, but I know my limits. I'm not gifted. My debut painting was my best, started at my peak, and it's been downhill ever since. I really liked it, he said quietly. Your paintings reminded me of my mom. That's part of why I wanted to talk to you, not just because of Declan, but for personal reasons too. Which painting? I asked. The goddess? His eyes widened. How did you know? The goddess was my debut piece, and my best one. Only when I paint with raw passion can I create something worthwhile. That painting was born from that kind of fire. Everything I made after that was ordinary. When the goddess came out, it shocked the art world. Everyone wanted to buy it. They said it made them feel love, burning, consuming love. Beckett frowned. Love? Yes. The woman in the painting faces outward, her eyes sad yet full of longing. She looks up at you, reaching toward you, as if craving your touch. People said she was both sensual and pure, someone who stirred both desire and the need to protect. The perfect lover. But it seems, you saw something different. No, Beckett said, shaking his head. Not love. Family. That painting, it wasn't about a lover. It was about a mother. She's not looking up passionately, she's looking down tenderly. Her hand isn't reaching upward, it's falling downward, not begging, but giving. Not desire. Not the wish to be protected. It's sacrifice, the instinct to protect. My heartbeat quickened. I stared at him. So, in your eyes, the meaning is the complete opposite. Everyone else sees her from above, but you see her from below. That changes everything, she's no longer looking up, but down. Why do you see her that way? Beckett's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Because I could never see that woman as a lover. Her face looks exactly like my mother's. The mother I lost years ago. It's possible that the woman you painted is my mother. I blinked, stunned. Your mother? That's unbelievable. Could there really be such a coincidence? Beckett hesitated. I'm not sure. But I want to find out who your model was. And, if possible, buy the painting. I said softly, then why don't you tell me your story first? If we're going to trade, your answer's for mine, let's start there. Beckett composed himself. So that's why you finally agreed to this interview? Not entirely, I said. You knew I went to your show today? I just found out. My assistant called me tonight before I came here. She told me you said the goddess looked like your mother and that you wanted to buy it. You're the first person who's ever said that. Beckett leaned forward. I meant it. I really do want to buy it. I smiled faintly. Then let's start with your story. 6. Beckett began his story. I was born in the early 90s. What happened when I was 5, it's haunted me ever since. My parents were factory workers. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Then came the wave of layoffs in the 90s. Both of my parents lost their jobs. Overnight, our family had no income. Things got really hard. I remember moving again and again, each new place smaller, darker, colder. We could barely afford food. My mom started selling pancakes on the street, but her stall got destroyed by thugs. My dad tried to follow some people overseas for illegal work, but he was scammed and lost all the money he'd saved for the trip. They ended up picking discarded vegetables and scraps of meat at the market just to survive. If they got there too late, there was nothing left. There were too many unemployed families doing the same thing. Most nights, we sat around an empty table, sipping thin rice soup. The house was always filled with the sound of my parents sighing. He took a shaky breath before continuing. I was just a kid, but I wanted to help. So I followed some boys to the river to catch fish. I was starving, dizzy, and the next thing I knew, I blacked out and fell into the water. They pulled me out just in time, but I got pneumonia from nearly drowning. That pushed us even deeper into debt. Beckett's voice trembled, and his eyes were glassy. He was only in his 20s now, but it was clear that the pain of that childhood had shaped him. I didn't know what to say. I was older than him, but not any wiser about such suffering. I understand, I said quietly. I lived through that chaotic time too. What happened after that? He hesitated, then said, later, someone wanted to marry my mom. I frowned. He went on. My dad agreed, for 500 yuan. That man promised he'd take care of her forever. I was 5. I barely remember the details, but I'll never forget the moment she left. She turned to look at me through the crowd, her eyes full of love and sorrow. She reached her hand out to me, just like the woman in your painting, but then she lowered it, turned away, and disappeared into the dark train. I screamed for her, tried to run after her, but my dad held me back. The train left, and she never came back. His voice cracked. When I was little, I hated her. I thought she'd abandoned me. Only later did I understand. My dad worked himself to death a few years later. So, you said you're an orphan. Well, I am too. The difference is, I once had a family. And when you've known love, losing it hurts even more. I said softly, losing something and never having it are two kinds of pain. I can't truly grasp what it's like to lose a mother's love, but I've always wondered what it would feel like to have it. What happened after that? Beckett continued, when I was 15, I already had a knack for writing. I wrote essays and even serialized a short novel in the local paper. I worked like crazy, writing day and night, and made over 500 yuan. With that money, I started searching for the man who'd taken my mother away. I wanted to bring her home. When I finally found him, he took my money, bought me a big meal, and kept dodging my questions. After he spent the last of it, he finally said that a year after taking my mother, he sold her again. To those kinds of people, you know, the kind who make women work in certain places. His voice broke completely then, tears streaming down his face. I sighed softly. I understand now. That's why you saw the goddess as a mother, while everyone else saw a lover. Don't cry. Here, have some water. Beckett took the glass, his voice hollow. I never saw her again. Isn't that pathetic? I gave a bitter smile. For over a decade, I've been living in mediocrity. The goddess is still my only good painting. I think that's pretty pathetic too. Everyone has their own idea of tragedy, Beckett said quietly. For me, it's wishing for a complete family. Wishing my mom hadn't suffered. Wishing my dad hadn't died. But life doesn't rewind. Even if it did, I doubt it would turn out better. So, I try not to dwell on it. I understand, I said. My family wasn't perfect either, but I don't see it as tragic. What feels tragic to me is my failed career. He tried to comfort me. Not every painter becomes famous. Creating a piece you're proud of, that's enough. I nodded. You're right. I don't care about fame. I just want to paint one more piece that satisfies me, a companion to the goddess. When that painting is done, I'll end my career. That will be my closure. Beckett frowned. You're not even 40. Why talk about ending your career? Are you sick? I smiled faintly. No. But most artists only create their best work at the beginning and the end of their journey. That sounds tragic, but it's the truth. That's as close to complete as I can get. He looked confused. I don't really get it. I want the goddess's sequel to show what she's seeing, or who she's seeing, I explained. Everyone says she's looking at her lover, so naturally they think she's the one being adored. But I can't bring myself to paint it. Something feels off. So I waited for someone who truly understood. And I finally met you. I was wrong to reject you before. Beckett asked softly, and why are you so sure my understanding is the right one? At the very least, you and I see from the same angle, I said, lowering my voice. When I painted her, I was looking up at her. He blinked. Up? Yes, literally. She was above me. I was below her. Not the other way around. I looked straight at him. And that brings us back to the main topic, Declan, the killer. Beckett's eyes narrowed. What does he have to do with your painting? If you look closely, I said, you'll notice the date in the bottom left corner of the canvas. It's from 1998, the same year I met Declan. It all happened that New Year's Eve. Beckett's expression darkened. I have a bad feeling about this. Why? Declan confessed that many of his victims were women forced into that kind of life. They were the ones no one looked for, no one missed. Their disappearances left no trace. His voice trembled as he spoke. I tried to reassure him. Even if your mother's story inspired me, it doesn't mean the woman I met was actually her. You know how chaotic things were back then, after the layoffs, life was hard. There were many lost souls, many women in desperate situations. He nodded faintly, though his face was pale. I exhaled softly. All right, let's return to the real reason you came. You wanted to know what really happened the night I met Declan. 7. I told my story. I'd already mentioned before, I'm an orphan. The kind that got abandoned the moment I was born. Back then, besides the wave of job layoffs, there was also a wave of abandoned babies. From a big picture view, it was common. But for me, it was the start of a tragedy. I was sickly as a kid. My body was weak, my mind wasn't in great shape either, and one made the other worse, a bad cycle that never ended. With life being so hard back then, the fact that I even survived feels like a miracle. I'll skip the details of my childhood, it's enough to say my mind wasn't exactly healthy from the start. I just saw things differently. But I never did anything bad. The only thing that kept me going was painting. Painting helped me escape reality for a while. Whenever I wasn't working odd jobs, I was painting. I didn't have talent, just a lot of practice. My work was decent, but it lacked soul. Once, I reached out to a teacher from an art academy. He told me, "If you can paint something that moves me, I'll let you study for free." I knew that was just a polite way of saying no. Later, I met a woman who ran a little shop. She was really kind to me. She paid me to help watch the store and said I could paint whenever it was quiet. One year, around New Year's, she and her husband were going back to their hometown. Seeing I was all alone, they asked me to come along, but I refused. She didn't push, just said I could stay at her place during the holidays so I'd be more comfortable. She lived in an apartment, a nice one, with a landline phone, which was a luxury back then. And that's where it all happened, that New Year's Eve, 1998. I was sitting alone in her living room, watching the Spring Festival Gala on TV. But the laughter and songs on the screen felt like they belonged to another world. I couldn't feel any joy. So I pulled out my easel and tried to paint. But my mind was blank. I just stared at the empty canvas, unable to start. As midnight drew near, the countdown began on TV, 10, 9, 8. A new year was about to begin. Maybe life would finally get better. I noticed it was snowing outside, and for a moment, my mood lifted. I wrapped myself in a padded jacket, went out onto the balcony, and reached out my hand to catch the snowflakes. And from that single movement, everything went off track. White flakes, 1, 2. Then dark drops, 1, 2. I blinked in confusion, looking down at my palm. Sticky, dark red liquid. I brought it closer, it smelled sweet, metallic. Blood. My whole body stiffened, gears grinding in my brain. Slowly, my neck turned upward. Leaning against the cold railing, I looked up. On the floor above mine, a woman was hanging halfway out of her balcony. She was looking down. I was looking up. And her lifeless face met mine directly. Her head hung low, one arm dangling weakly toward me, fingertips almost reaching my own. Blood trailed down her arm like a slow winter stream, dripping steadily from her fingers. Something inside me snapped. I'd been suppressing everything for years, and at that moment, it all broke loose. I screamed. But no one heard me, my voice drowned in the roar of fireworks and exploding firecrackers. Still, the noise must have reached someone. Because almost instantly, that dangling arm twitched and was yanked back inside. Someone had pulled her in. And of course, the next thing that person would do was look down. Even a broken clock can tick fast when it's wound tight. I stopped screaming. In a flash, I darted back inside. I turned off the lights. Turned off the TV. Moved quietly, like a cat, fast but silent. Then I crouched beside the couch, swallowed by the dark, staring at the door. There were 6 floors in that building, 8 apartments per floor. I lived in 302. Above me, 402. With all the noise from the fireworks, maybe he couldn't tell which floor the scream had come from. Maybe, if he saw the lights off, he'd think no one was home and move on. The hallway light flicked on. A faint glow seeped through the crack under my door and stopped. A pair of feet. They stood there. Still. Listening. A whole minute passed before the knocking began. Slow. Steady. Thud. 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 Anyone home? Thud. 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 Something fell onto your balcony. Are you in there? The man's voice carried a strange, almost playful tone. The knocking grew faster, louder. Each thud pounded in my chest, hammering my nerves raw. I held my breath. After what felt like forever, the footsteps finally faded away. I exhaled shakily. I should have grabbed the phone. I should have called the police. There was a phone right there. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen. My mind went blank, like I'd chosen to forget what just happened. Fear and excitement tangled together in my chest. All I could see was that woman, her body hanging, her eyes locked on mine. The image burned into my mind, shaking me to my core. I had to paint her. So I did. Right there, in the dark. Only the flicker of fireworks outside lighting the room now and then. I started painting like someone possessed. About an hour later, a noise. Metal clanging. Then, a heavy thud. My heart stopped. He was on the balcony. There was no enclosure, just the railing. And the door, it wasn't locked. The man from upstairs had jumped down. Onto my balcony. Then he stepped into the living room. The apartment was tiny. There was nowhere to hide. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Every step he took made the air colder, tighter, until finally, a hand closed around my throat. 8. What happened next? Beckett asked, his voice tight with curiosity. I went on. It was still snowing. Declan said the railing had snow on it, except for one spot, the part I'd touched. He gave this cold little laugh, and his hands started tightening. I'll never forget that feeling of suffocating. I get it now, Beckett said suddenly. When he looked down from above, only your balcony railing had a patch without snow, because when you leaned back during the moment you saw him, you brushed that spot clean. Yes, I nodded. That's how he knew it was me. So he came straight to my door. And then? Beckett pressed. He grabbed your throat. What did you say to him when you were about to die? My neck was almost breaking, I said quietly, but suddenly my mind went cold and clear. Do you really not know what I said? Beckett shook his head. No. Only that whatever you said turned out to be a prophecy. Technically, I said two things, I corrected him. The first made him loosen his grip. The second made him let me go. The second one was the prophecy. I really can't guess. I gave a small smile. All right. You once said I'm a clear-minded egoist. I completely agree. The egoist part is obvious, but the key is being clear-minded. Stop keeping me in suspense. No one's selfish for no reason, I said. Every deal has to be two-way. If you want to protect yourself, you've got to make it worth something to the other side. Like this interview, for example, you want my story, and I want yours. Same thing back then, if I wanted Declan not to hurt me, I had to make sure hurting me would hurt him too. When his hand was on my throat, I realized this was a transaction, a deal about life and death. He wanted my life, so I had to show him there would be a price for taking it. Beckett frowned. But you said you didn't even call the police. What price could there be? Exactly, I said. So I had to find a way to make up for that mistake. He leaned forward. So what did you tell him? I sighed. You still don't get it. Let's take Declan himself as an example. I told you before, he was extremely smart, too smart, in fact. Smart enough to lose his humanity. You know his childhood story, right? He and his mother were kidnapped once. His mother's family was poor, couldn't pay ransom, and in the end, she was killed. Beckett nodded slowly. Yeah. Wait, that doesn't make sense. If the kidnappers didn't get the money, why would they kill her and let him go? That's exactly the point. I said. Because it wasn't the kidnappers who killed her. It was Declan. What? Think about it. No criminal would just let them go based on a promise like "I won't tell anyone." That's not how the world works. So Declan made a deal. To save his own life, he had them record him killing his mother, proof of his guilt. That way, both sides had something on each other. The kidnappers could trust that he'd never go to the police, because if he did, his own crime would come out too. Only then did they let him live. Beckett stared at me, horrified. I've heard of twisted deals, but that's beyond cold-blooded. He really was a monster. Wait, don't tell me you. I didn't, I cut in. There was only me and Declan in that room. Who could I have killed? I just reused the same idea and took a gamble. You mean, about calling the police? I nodded. Yeah. When his hand was on my throat, I gasped out, "Why do you think I didn't call the cops?" Then I pointed at the landline phone not far away. Beckett frowned. But what's the point? Why would he care? Did you expect him to believe you didn't call because you wanted to protect him? Of course not. But think about it differently. I leaned closer. If someone saw murder and later didn't call the police, how likely is it that they just forgot? That they were too mentally unstable, too lost in their own head, say, obsessed with painting the dead woman upstairs instead? Beckett blinked. That's a pretty rare kind of person. Exactly, I said. So I used that mistake and told him a lie. I said I didn't call because I couldn't. Because I couldn't have any contact with the police. I told him I was a fugitive. That I was on the run. Beckett's eyes widened. He'd killed people, I continued, and now I told him I had too. So neither of us could go to the police. We both had something on the other. Killing me would have only made things harder for him, especially if the police were already looking for me. He'd just draw attention to himself. I see, Beckett said slowly. But that's not quite the same as his case. You had no proof. Why would he believe you, just because you didn't call the cops? He didn't have to believe me completely, I said. But it was safer for him not to kill me. Think about it, after seeing the body, I turned off the lights, pretended no one was home, even painted in the dark. When he came in, he had his face covered. I never saw him clearly. Back then, police investigations weren't high-tech. They relied on witnesses. Since I couldn't identify him, he just had to tie me up or knock me out and run. Killing me would have been unnecessary risk. It was a gamble. But I bet right. He let me live. And he told me about his kidnapping story. Honestly, it felt like he saw me as a kindred spirit. Beckett's expression twisted. Kindred spirit. You and Declan. Right. I gave a dry laugh. Yeah. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? It's just, something feels off, Beckett muttered, frowning hard. Wait. Hold on. I think I'm missing something. His eyes darted around the room. You don't look well, I said gently. He rubbed his temple. Yeah. Not well. Started about half an hour ago. What kind of feeling? I asked softly. My body feels weak. Head spinning. Why do I? He suddenly looked up, eyes wide with realization. The glass of water on the table slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. 9. It's just a mild sedative, I said, picking up a rope from beside me. Something I use often. I've built up a tolerance, but for you, the effect's a little stronger. Beckett's voice trembled as he fought to stay conscious. What are you trying to do? He gripped the edge of the table, forcing himself to stand, but his legs gave out and he collapsed. I crouched beside him and smiled faintly. I'm here to remind you what you missed, the prophecy. The prophecy. His voice was barely a whisper. I said I was a wanted man. That was the prophecy. Almost 20 years ago, I spoke it into existence. And now, it's finally coming true. Why? Fear flickered in Beckett's eyes. I slowly looped the rope around his neck. Meeting Declan was a curse for most people. But for me, it was a gift, God's gift to someone like me, someone with no talent. Beckett tried to crawl toward the door. He made me realize something, I continued, my tone calm, almost gentle. I'm not untalented. My gift just needed a different kind of trigger. The rope tightened. My best work, my debut painting The Goddess, was inspired by that night, the woman who fell from the balcony. I brought that painting to my art professor, and he was moved. He said it was love, waived my tuition, and took me in as his student. I sighed softly. But I never painted anything that good again. The rope grew taut. Beckett gasped, struggling for breath. I kept trying to recapture that feeling, the tension, the thrill, the complete loss of self. I thought if I could return to that state, I'd create something great again. I tried everything, drinking, speeding, drugs. I destroyed my mind trying to awaken that spark. But nothing worked. No matter what I did, I couldn't get there. The rope bit deeper into his skin. All those failed attempts just proved one thing, only death, the moment of witnessing death itself, can awaken that state again. Beckett lifted his trembling hands upward, as if reaching for some unseen protection. Good, I whispered, almost admiringly. That posture. Hold it. Just like that. 18 years ago, I met Declan. Because of him, the goddess was born. How many people in a lifetime get to meet a murderer? To see death with their own eyes? It's luck, dark, impossible luck. You can't expect to find it twice. Unless, I smiled. You make it happen yourself. I've lived with the pain of mediocrity for years. I've fought the urge to kill again. But that pain, it's worse. When Declan was finally caught, I knew I couldn't wait anymore. I couldn't depend on fate. I had to create my own moment. The rope dug deep. I knew what it would mean, the end of my career, my life as I knew it. But that's fine. A perfect ending is better than a meaningless continuation. My voice dropped to a whisper. It's unbearable, knowing that the person who once painted the goddess has turned into an empty shell. I've been a walking corpse for over a decade, denying what I truly am. A strange calm filled me. But now, I can finally paint its sequel. The child of the goddess has found his way to me. For over a month, you kept coming back, Beckett. I pushed you away, but you wouldn't leave. Now I understand, it was fate. I wasn't meant to hold back anymore. I looked into his eyes. My instinct tells me, the woman in the goddess, and you, your mother and son. You'll go to heaven to be with her, and your sacrifice will complete both of us. I smiled, softly. A perfect ending for everyone. 10. That's everything I have to confess, I said calmly. An hour earlier, the police had arrived at my secluded studio in the West Wing of the Art Academy. They found me, one body, and two paintings. One was the goddess, now retitled Mother. The other, Child. Mother showed a woman leaning downward, her arms outstretched, full of tenderness. Child showed a boy on the ground, reaching upward, desperate for her touch. Both figures faced forward, looking straight out of the canvas. When displayed together, Mother above, Child below, their gazes finally met. The cycle was complete. Do these paintings tell a story? One officer asked. Yes, I said softly. A mother boards a train, leaving home. She leans out the window to reach for her child one last time. The child runs after the train, falls, and reaches up in vain. The officer exhaled. It's Beckett's story. Then, quietly, let's go. They started to lead me out. At the doorway, one officer hesitated. So, were they really mother and son? I smiled faintly. Right now, I can only say my intuition tells me so. But I'd like confirmation, scientific proof, a DNA test, maybe. That would make it perfect. I'm counting on you for that. He shook his head. We can't. The woman you claim died that night, there's no record, no body. I think she only exists in your imagination. She's real, I said quietly. That night, on the balcony, I reached out to catch the falling snow. Instead, 2 drops of blood landed in my palm. That was the beginning of the story, and it should also be the end. I looked up at him. The blood still on the painting. Please, officer, have it tested.